Welcome back to the 90s Rewind, everybody. And it is my absolute pleasure this evening to be speaking to somebody who's been in front of me before. It was on the 4th of May, 1996, except we were in a very different situation there. You were standing at the front and singing, and I was going a bit mental down the front. Rick Witter, how are you doing?
Hello, Paul. You all right? Yes. So where was that? Which gig was that?
That was at the Forum in London.
Uh,
It was one of those first proper gig I would say I've been to. I've been to kind of big stadium things before where you can't quite see everybody at the back, but this was the first time I'd been up the front, and there were the people that I'd been buying CDs from at the time. You remember what
yeah,
CDs were, kids? And there you all were. It was an amazing evening.
great stuff. Well, that would have been if it was May '96. I think the Maximum High album came out in April '96. It must have been a tour to promote that, which would have been good times at that point because we were all quite excited about that album. So it would have been not that I can remember, but it probably was a really good time.
It was. I mean, the whole band, the way that you'd sort of come together. Of course, Maximum High was that kind of moment where you kind of started hitting the highs of the charts. But you had 15 top 40 hits over the course of the Shed's career during the 90s and early 2000s. And I mean, did you know at the time that you were writing songs that people were going to go out and buy, or was it just you were making music and it just happened to be a hook for people?
Well, that particular stage, we'd had a debut album out and it had done okay. Suddenly, after spending about 5 years creating a debut album but not knowing if you'd ever get anywhere with it,
Yeah.
suddenly you've got like 2 years to come up with the goods again, but with that added little bit of pressure of the fact that you don't want it to fail because the first album did okay.
Yeah.
So but we didn't really have that difficult second album syndrome, really. It was weird. We'd kind of finished with the Change Giver sessions, and we'd gone off purposefully to go off the radar a little bit and start writing new songs. But as I say, with the difficult second album syndrome, we were immediately coming up with songs like Getting Better and Going for Gold. They were all quite triumphant and positive and upbeat. So we kind of knew we were on a little bit of a roll in that respect. So once we'd amassed 3/4 of the Maximum High, we kind of settled into it and knew that what we'd done was good. And it was a kind of a step up from Change Giver. It was recorded a little bit better. We thought about it a little bit more because we were 2 or 3 years older. And the experience of playing a lot more live meant that we were a little bit more musically savvy as well. So it kind of came to a head just at that proper Britpop point.
Yeah, and I'm going to get onto the whole sort of Britpop thing in a bit because we've spoken to other guests about how they feel that some of these things are kind of manufactured around them. But just going back to your live gigs, I mean that tour. I mean, I saw an old photograph of an advert for the tour the other day on Twitter, and it was literally everything was sold out from top to bottom. And some of the bands that were supporting you, you had this kind of thing that actually they went on to be just as successful as yourselves. I mean, there was some great music on that tour, wasn't there?
Yeah, there really was. I mean, to be honest, through that time period, most of the bands that supported us actually went on to be bigger than us or sell more records than us. So we were obviously some type of lucky charm. But it was great. It was great seeing these new bands who we knew were really good, sharing a stage with them and seeing the success happen. But to be honest, it got to the point in that mid-90s where you could do anything really. And it just became quite a celebratory, triumphant time, didn't it, really? Not just musically, I think in every art aspect, really.
Yeah, there was that whole thing around about 1997. That sort of obviously we had change of government and everything else, and the Britpop thing, the Cool Britannia thing was going strong. Was it an active decision to kind of go, all right, we'll join in with all that? Because I know you did. There was the big BBC special, wasn't there? And there was all sorts of things celebrating, various different bands. Did you sort of have to make a decision of, what, we are going to be a part of this, or was it just that the management and the record company were like, no, this is where we're going, lads. This is what's happening.
Well, no, not really. I think people look through rose-tinted spectacles to an extent because at the time we weren't really very credible in the sense that the music press kind of turned on us a little bit, and we weren't written about. Not 100% here. We did get good reviews and we got good live reviews, but we also got some pretty dog ones as well. And back in the day, and even now to a point, when people reminisce about Britpop, they talk about Pulp, Blur, and Oasis, and then the also runs. And we were always kind of classed as a bit of a League One band rather than a Premiership band. But weirdly and thankfully and luckily, so many years down the line, we're still here doing it when a lot of the other bands aren't. And we're still managing to play in relatively big venues, and the people that come and see us just absolutely love it. So I would much rather have it the way it's happened rather than be quite big at the time and fizzle out.
Well, I've got to say, you talk about that longevity. I mean, the moment I mentioned on social media that I was going to be talking to you today, immediately a lot of love pouring out for the band, including from Genevieve, who said she's literally just named her shed after you. She's got a writing shed, and apparently her mum confused you with Heaven 17, so it's now known as Shed 17. But you know, the meaning was there.
Yes, funnily enough, I do see that a lot myself on Twitter. There must be quite a few Shed 7s in people's back gardens. We could actually do a tour of those, couldn't we?
That would be great. I mean, that's fine. If you want me to come and cover that, I'll come around to Woods. It would do some sort of live recording or something.
It would be a novel tour, wouldn't it? Going around playing in people's back gardens outside their Shed 7s. So if anyone wants to get a Shed 7, if enough people do it, then we could spend the year just going around and nosying around people's houses, couldn't we?
Excellent. And if you ever need a poet to support, I'm there. Now you've chosen some of the playlists for us tonight, and we opened with the Verve, and you went for New Decade. When you said to me the Verve, I was like, how am I going to tell him that every guest that's been on has chosen Bittersweet Symphony? How am I going to tell him that? And you went for somewhere different, and I'm very, very pleased. Why New Decade?
Yeah, well, Bittersweet Symphony for me would be slightly obvious. Like if I was to choose Pulp, Common People, it would be slightly obvious. Yeah. I just remember very early 90s listening to, well, I was a fan of the Verve before A Northern Soul came out. I was into the really early Trippier stuff. But when the Northern Soul album came out, it was pretty mind-blowing, really. Just the guitar work on there is incredible. Ashcroft just sounds amazing. The words were great. And as an opening track on a new album, and just the meaning of it, just, you know, I can still listen to it now and it gives me goosebumps. So I just thought, yeah, let's let everyone hear this one.
And then you mentioned Blur earlier on, and again, I've had to change my playlist this evening. I'm very upset about this. I was going to play Pop Scene, but you've come up with something even better. Oily Water from Modern Life is Rubbish. Why is that our next track?
Yeah, well, again, with that one, I always like it when bands go a little bit off-piste and do something slightly different. And I'm a bit of a sucker for songs that go on for ages at the end. And this particular track does that with a lot of noise. I just really like the guitar sounds on it. And again, I was a big Blur fan before we were kind of known. I liked the first album, Leisure, and then when this album came out, for me, it was a bit of a step up again, a little bit like between Changegiver and A Maximum High. But they were quite clever at doing the pure pop songs, but at the same time, kind of going off-piste a little bit and doing something slightly different. And as I say, I'm a sucker for a song that goes on for ages at the end. So everyone enjoy the end of this.
This is Oily Water from Blur.